Mixing pesticides. Let's talk about mixing pesticides. What's the first thing that you want to do before you mix a pesticide? Let me give you a clue. The first thing you want to do before you mix a pesticide, I'm going to pull this right off of here. Here's some master line. I am going to read the label. That's right. I'm going to read this label and I want to find out what rate can I mix it at. So here's a chart right here that shows me the rate, the mixing rates. It will tell me the dilution rate. For instance, on here, let's take a look. So this says that master line, if I'm going to mix 1 gallon of master line and I put in 0.02%, then that's going to be 0.012% active ingredient. Okay, so let's talk about that. Let's take a look. If I was going to mix this pesticide, first thing I'm going to do is make sure I've got some glasses, some safety glasses on. I want to make sure that I've got my gloves on, my hat, long pants, rubber boots, the whole works, right? Then I'm going to read the label like I just did. And the label tells me in this case that I want to have 2 fluid ounces, let's see, to 1 gallon, we want 0.2 fluid ounces to 1 gallon makes 0.012. Okay, so you can see this line on here, it's got the marks. Okay, so we're going to go right to that tube. So the way that these pesticide containers work is that you tilt this product and you can see the product in there coming up the top and into this measuring cup right here. Okay, so now it's right in there, and then you just tilt it back until you get it leveled off at what rate that you want, how much you want to put in there. So now, once you got that at what rate that you want that put in there, and then, okay, so this is master line. All right, here's another one, the Tarrant that we had earlier. You can see on there, it's got the 0.40 or 0.80 marks on it. So you take it and you measure it out. Then once you've measured it out, then you pour some water before. Okay, so before we're going to pour any of the product into our sprayer, what we want to do is we want to put water in it. So you always want to put about 1/3 of your spray rig or your canister. You want to fill it up about 1/3 of the way with water. Then, after you've done the water, then you want to add the pesticide to it. Then you want to add the rest of the water on top of it, okay? Then you can close it up and pump it up and shake it to mix it up real good. So, and like I say, before you start mixing, you always want to make sure that you have everything that you need, like your gloves, rubber boots, okay? You don't have to wear these gloves. You can wear these kind of gloves. The label only calls for chemical resistant gloves with these products. You want to make sure that you have some kind of eye protection, you know, whether it's a face shield or goggles or something that goes over your glasses, but whatever you're going to use, just make sure that you've got some proper personal protective equipment when you start mixing, okay? So, now, another thing about mixing chemicals is you want to make sure that you do it in a safe area, okay? So You want to make sure that you're doing it in an area where there's not a lot of kids or pets right next to you. We talked earlier about spilling pesticide on the ground. So whenever you mix pesticide, it's a good idea to make sure that you're over concrete. Concrete is easier to clean up. It won't absorb or soak up so much of it. So if you spill some on concrete, you can put down some absorbent, contain that spill, and clean it up, and it cleans up pretty well. But if you were over dirt, if you're on a dirt area and you spilled that, that's going to soak down into that dirt and into that soil. And depending on the product, you could have a problem with that leaching. You could have a problem with it when it rains, that it could move off site. So then now you have a problem that to really properly clean it, you would have to remove all of that dirt that absorbed that chemical, and that would be real hard. So when you're mixing, just make sure you position yourself in a safe area, in a safe place. You don't want to be out in the wind where if it's too windy, mixing chemicals, that's a big mistake. You don't really think about it, even if you're pouring it. We're not just talking about spraying, but just by pouring this, when it's coming out, if a big gust of wind comes up, it can just blow that. At the least, it would just get like on the side of on your canister and just make a mess, or it can get on your clothes. When you're pouring, and if you're outside, if there's a way to position yourself to where it's not so windy, that's a good thing. In some cases, if it's too windy, it's not going to do any good to mix the pesticide anyway, because you probably can't apply it if you're applying it outside. But then again, if you're applying it inside, then you're probably okay. So it just depends. As pest control operators, we run into a lot of different situations. Some are more delicate than others, and we just have to adapt and be able to do what we have to. So if you get to a place and it's real windy outside, and you got an indoor treatment, and you have a very limited time to do it, then you might just need to have to find somewhere to park your vehicle where there's a windbreak or something, so you can safely mix that chemical, and also be somewhere where you're parked, so in case of a spill. You just want to think about that. Sometimes we just have to go through those extra steps as professionals to prevent things from happening. Other people may not understand what you're doing. They'll say all the time, "Oh, it's okay, you can just park there, that's fine with me." But what they don't understand is we may have a reason for why we might need to park somewhere else or be somewhere else. So take the time when you do those things. It makes it safer for yourself and for other people and the environment. So if you're mixing pesticides, you want to make sure that you're always in a well-ventilated area, okay? If you're in a garage like I am right now, you want to make sure that door is open, you got plenty of air going through. I have a fan down here I would have on if it wasn't so noisy right now talking, but keep some air flowing through and keep it going. And just make sure that wherever you're at, when you're mixing chemicals, that you don't allow these fumes to get to you. Even on a still, very still, warm, humid day, these chemicals can just kind of linger, the fumes to them, and they can get to you. So be aware of that. Stay in ventilated areas, keep moving around. If you start feeling any signs of pesticide poisoning, you need to do something about that right away. Another thing is we talked about that you want to be on concrete when you're mixing, but also you don't want to be right next to a place that, say, would have groundwater, or say a well. Maybe you're out doing a job in the country, and these people have a well right next to their house, and you're parked right next to the well. Well, that might not be a good spot, especially if you're on the dirt and you're out in the country right next to their well, and maybe they got a short well and the groundwater is close to the surface. You certainly would not want to mix pesticides right there in that spot. If they had a paved driveway, I know I've been in several places here in Texas, we have a lot of houses that are ranches or ranchettes, and they'll have a dirt road that leads to it, or they'll have, you know, a big barn, or maybe just a big, you know, like a shop that's been built next to their house. And a lot of times it's just all on dirt or gravel roads. But usually there's cement by their house next to where you pull into the driveway. So their driveway going into the garage usually has some cement. So say you're out in a house in a ranch, and you're parked next to a well, and you're on the dirt, and you got to tell those people, I'm going to have to move my truck over here on your pavement so I can mix some chemical. And then you might have to move your truck, mix the chemical over there in a safe spot, and then you might have to move your truck again if that's what it calls for you to be able to apply that chemical, and you just have to do what you have to do. So take a look around, be aware of your surroundings and what's going on. Don't do things without understanding or in an ignorant way. Do them so that you understand. You pulled up to the house, you saw a parking area over here that's got cement, you see the rest of it is all dirt, you see a well over there, you know pulling up that, you know, that's not an area that I can mix at, you know, and just recognize that stuff. Be aware, think about it, be thinking ahead. That can really help. Okay. We talked about not mixing chemicals right next to a storm drain, or what happens if you we talked about what happens if you spill on the street and the water washes that into a storm drain. So you know how important it is to keep chemicals out of a storm drain. So a lot of houses, when you pull up out front, sometimes it might just happen to be that right where you park is right next to the storm drain. Well, that's okay unless you need to mix some chemicals. So there again, pulling up to the house, you might want to think about it. Am I going to have to mix some chemicals? Then I might want to park on the other side of the driveway or the other side of the street, or somewhere away and get away from the storm drain just in case something happens. Because if you're right next to the storm drain, I don't mean just a few feet from it or down ways, but right, literally parked right next to it, and this canister sitting here next on my tailgate, and said for whatever reason I don't have the lid on and that falls off, it could go right down in that storm drain, or it could just fall right next to it, and in the time it takes you to bend down and pick it up, it's sitting there going gloop, 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 and you got pesticide running out and right into the storm drain. So try not to mix chemicals right next to a storm drain. Position your truck in a way not to do that. If you go into a house and then you sell a job and now you realize, oh, now I'm going to have to mix something that I don't already have mixed up or ready, well, you might have to move your truck to do it safely. So do what you have to do it professionally and do it safe. Also, kind of the same thing goes for on a hill. If you're on a hillside and it's a very slanted hill and you're right next to a pond or a koi pond or a river or something like that, there again you might want to find a more level ground to mix your chemical on, because if something happens and then all of a sudden it starts raining, it could wash that chemical right into that groundwater. So be aware that you want to mix on a level area. You want it to be concrete if it can, and not next to a storm drain. And you want to be prepared in case something goes wrong. Have a chemical spill kit on your vehicle and be ready in case you need it. Okay, now we're going to talk about measuring pesticides and how to measure them. So the best way to measure pesticides, just like I was showing you earlier, was that, for instance, here's this pesticide master line. It has a built-in measuring cup in it where you tilt that and the pesticide goes into here, and then you can tilt it back to level it out. So that's on that one. Okay, these are brand new, they've never even been opened. Here's another one. It's got the measuring cup right there on it. Okay, I'll show you some of the others that I have in my truck here. Okay, Okay, so here's some Talstar, or I'm sorry, Transport. This is Transport. The Transport also has the mixing thing right in it right there. You can buy these jugs. They're just jugs with a measuring thing already built into it, a little measuring cup in there. And then you can just write the product on it, Telstar Pro. Okay, this is Telstar Pro. You don't have to have the original sticker, does not have to be on the container. The container just has to be marked with what is in it. And then so if you buy a big jug like this, it can be not as easy to measure out, say, 1 ounce and then pour it into a hand sprayer. Okay, so what I do is I'll pour it into these smaller bottles to make it more manageable. So, and then pour it into here. All right, so you want to always use the original container, okay? Or if it's not the original container, then a container that's made for pesticides. But in either case, you want to use the container that the pesticide is in, as opposed to using a mixing cup or something that you pour it in and measure it, okay? Don't do that. Use the container that the pesticide came with, all right? Keep that label on the container if it's got one on it, all right? If there's a label on there, leave that label on there and keep it on there. You're required to do that. Now, sometimes, especially if you have a big jug like this and it may last a while and it gets rubbed around, and sometimes these labels will fall off. So if that label does fall off, make sure that you write the name of that product back on it. Just like this jug didn't come with a label on it at all, I can write it on there. So if you lose a label on one of these, make sure you write on there what it is. That also brings up a good point, is that I will keep a Sharpie in my truck, so that if I do lose a label, or if something needs to have something, or I get a new jug, I can write on those labels with that. Try to mix, whenever you're mixing pesticides, try to only mix what you need for the job. If you go and you mix up, say you're going to treat a house for ants and you need a gallon of pesticide to do it. So try to just mix up a gallon, or if you only need a half a gallon to do it, then try to only mix up a half a gallon and use all of it up. It's better to do that than to mix too much. More is not always better, but it's better to go ahead and use up what you mixed if you can, okay? So if you go all the way around a house and you sprayed and you still have some left in here, it's okay to go back around the house and spray, especially a lot of times in Texas, wherever you start spraying, by the time you get all the way back around, it's already dry. So you can go back around and spray some more. As long as you're not getting runoff, okay? You want to spray it to the point right before it runs off. So if you go all the way around the house and you spray, by the time you get all the way back, if you still have some left, you can go back over and spray that again, or find other trails or other places that the label allows you to spray, and go ahead and try to use up that product, all that product on that job. After a while, you'll get used to being able to judge how much you're going to need for a job so that you don't overmix. Overmixing pesticides, it just it can cost you money. It doesn't really work that much better, and it can be very dangerous by overmixing pesticides as well. Another thing that will happen with overmixing pesticides is if you use too much and you keep using those pesticides on the same type of pest over and over in the same house, those bugs can actually develop a resistance to the pesticide. So we don't want to use too much pesticide. It helps to keep from building resistance to the pesticides. So also you want to be careful when you're opening the pesticides. These pesticides containers, I'm going to show you one here. Okay. So when you buy these pesticide containers, and when they're new, they have a seal on them. See right there? So, what I do to open these seals is I take a knife and I stick it in on the bottom side, and then I cut all the way around and lift it up a little bit, and then I peel it off. Okay? So you want to be careful with those with those things, because what will happen is when you're cutting this, if you're not careful, it can flip up and some can splash and get in your eye. Those little things, you want to take them off. You want to make sure that you throw them away somewhere that a kid or a pet's not going to pick it up and get pesticide on them. And then also, when you take off these lids, see, accidents happen, right? So now this one hasn't been opened yet. This is a new container, never been opened. It's still sealed. And especially on the new containers, you want to watch out. Inside of these lids is a little white seal that's in there. And be careful that when, sometimes when you take these lids off, that seal stays on there. And if you don't see that, and then you go and you pour it into a tank, or especially into a big spray rig, that little white thing will clog up everything. So I know that I've been where they repair these before, and they tell me that one of the biggest reasons that they get clogged up and stop working is because that little seal that's underneath that cap will fall into the tank. They don't see it, and then it gets sucked up into the pump, and it clogs things up. So you want to make sure that that you're very careful when you're opening these pesticides, that you don't let that seal be on there. Don't let any of that splash on you. You saw how when I opened that and I dropped and that lid fell. Well, in this case, there's nothing on it and it fell all the way to the floor. But if, say, I was working on my tailgate here, and if it had, and I've been using it, and say I just shook it up and it's got pesticide all over it, and if I took that lid off and I dropped it and it hit my tailgate, it could splash, and that splash could come up and get in my eye. And that's very dangerous with pesticides. That's 100%. So there's just 100 little things that can go wrong so quick, and you don't even think about it. And that's why you always want to wear, that's why I had my glasses, my gloves on, even in that demonstration. As you saw, that cap fell. In this case, there was no pesticide on it, but it could have ended up being a very dangerous situation. Okay, so when it comes into how to pour pesticides, make sure that you read the labels, that you follow the directions, that you're wearing the proper protective equipment to do it. You always want to use the original container, measure in the original container and pour from the original container, not into like a measuring cup and then into something else. You always want to make sure that that you keep your head above the container when you're pouring. Okay, say you have a truck and it's got a spray rig and a big tank in it, and it's up above your head. You don't want to have that pesticide chemicals pouring it above your head. So whenever you're pouring chemicals, make sure that your head is above the chemicals. Once again, don't pour in a strong wind. We talked about that, what can happen if you're pouring chemicals in a strong wind. Make sure that the wind's died down, or you find a safe place to pour. If the pesticide does spill on the ground, accidents happen. Just simply use your chemical spill kit to contain that spill, and then clean it up immediately as soon as you can. Okay. Something else, I always carry a bucket for trash, so that if I did have to clean that up, I could pour the kitty litter or whatever I use in that spill kit into a bucket. Okay. I also keep a couple trash bags too, just in case, so I could put it in the trash bag and then put that in the bucket. So be prepared. Think about what it's going to take to clean that mess up, and to make sure that you have everything on your truck to do that. Just remember, when you get a spill, you want to control that spill, contain it, and then clean it up. You're responsible for the people and the kids or any pets that come around and get into these pesticides while you're mixing it or applying it. So never leave pesticides unattended. Always make sure that you're mixing and doing these things in a safe area. Do not do things careless. Do it in a professional way. Make sure that whatever you're doing, you're taking the time to do it, and using the proper equipment as well as the protective equipment to do it the right way. Remember, be professional at all times. By being professional, it's safe for the environment, it's safe for the people and the pets that are around you. By being professional, it's safe for you. And not only is it safe, but it helps you to do a better job in controlling the pest. It keeps you from overusing pesticides. It keeps you from wearing the wrong equipment or getting hurt or getting sick. So be professional. Don't be careless. Take the time to do things right. That's professional. That's being a professional pest control applicator. Okay, let's talk about pesticide on your clothing, okay? When you get pesticide on your clothes, it can go through your clothes and into your skin. So it's very important that you carry extra clothes on your truck to, in case you get pesticide on your clothes. Not only do you want to be able to take that off and wash and clean up, but you don't want to have to wear those clothes all day that have absorbed pesticide and then is right next to your skin, and your skin can absorb that pesticide as well. So make sure that you always carry some extra clothes on your truck in case you get pesticide on your clothes. And when you're using gloves, make sure that you use chemical resistant gloves, okay? Don't use leather gloves. Don't use cloth or material gloves, because they're, again, just like clothes, they can absorb chemicals, and you want something that's chemical resistant. When you're working, don't wipe your gloves on your clothes, okay? Make sure that if you get chemicals all over and they're on your gloves, if I'm working and I've got these gloves on and something goes wrong for whatever reason and I get chemical all over these gloves and they're dripping in chemical, okay, here's what I'm gonna do. I've got some extra rags on my truck that are just for that purpose, so I can wipe that off on those rags that are designed for chemical. Then I can come over here and I can take some soap and water. You've seen the soap I carry in my truck, and just like if I'm not wearing gloves at all, I can put some soap on there and use water, and I can wash my hands with these gloves on and wash, and that it'll clean that up. So if you do get chemical all over your gloves, you can wash these gloves just like you wash your hands, all right? Now, on the other hand, if I'm wearing these kind of gloves and I get chemical, you know, all over these guys, the nice thing about this is there again, the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm not gonna just let dripping chemical all over me, okay? I've got a towel that's designated for that, and I'm gonna wipe my hands off, and then I'm gonna take these gloves off and I'm just gonna throw them away.